Hey folks, that was a pretty amazing session there by Rob Leffert and Brad McKay. Brad is going to be coming back a little bit later on today to join us to talk a little bit about some of the other features inside of Windows 10 and drill into them that are related to making your people more productive. As you can probably tell, I'm not in the same studio that I was a few moments ago before we started Rob's session. I've been relegated to what we're affectionately calling the broom cupboard, which I think folks from the UK, you'll probably know a little bit about what we mean by the broom cupboard, but this is a little studio which is off to the side of our main studio, and we're going to be doing post-match analysis in here where I'm going to go through for most of our presenters and actually ask a bunch of the questions that we saw come up during the session that you guys have been asking. We've been seeing lots of questions coming in on the chat on Channel 9, but we've also been seeing quite a lot of things coming in on the Twitters. So before we dive into the questions that were asked during that session, I wanted to just kind of point out some of the things that you folks have been doing at home whilst you've been watching the show. Just looking through some of these pictures, there are some pretty amazing pot plants appearing inside of some people's pictures. We're seeing some nice indoor foliage appearing, but we're also seeing just some of the things that you folks have in your office that really do show the geekier side of our audience. One thing that I think is a pretty consistent theme, so far the highest number of screens that I've seen in any one photograph I think is 5, but most people pretty much have about 3 screens visible in almost every single picture that we've seen. We've also seen quite a number of your old college logos appearing in the background so that we all know where you folks are showing your enthusiasm from. 1 or 2 people been showing certain parts of their pictures where they include things like their pin boards. If we zoom in onto some of those pin boards, we get some super interesting bits of information. And one gentleman, I have to say, this is pretty cool. In the back of his machine, he's got not only an Apple machine, which is showing us a bunch of the dongles that are connected, but he's showing us, I'm guessing, his prized Apple mug. So pretty impressive stuff. And then we've got some folks wearing some pretty cool t-shirts. There's a gentleman, Thomas, wearing a really nice Green Lantern t-shirt. And we have another gentleman who I can see called Run, Walk, Crawl, or Crawl, Walk, Run, actually on Twitter. He's got what appears to be a really green background behind him. So pretty amazing stuff. Thank you very much for sharing all of those pictures. Please do keep those coming in so that we get to see as many of these things as we possibly can. Pretty cool stuff that we're seeing there. Okay, I'm going to go over and answer 1 or 2 of your questions that came up during the last session. Hopefully provide you with some of these answers. Some of these questions will have been answered by our MVPs inside of the chat as they've been going, but it's always worthwhile actually raising up some of these things so you get to see them. Someone calling themselves Thurrott of Borg asked the question, will Windows Universal apps replace Win32 or .NET applications? Well, that's an interesting kind of position. It's entirely up to you as to whether or not they do. You're in control of the applications that are going to run on your systems. And yes, we're hoping that newer applications are going to come out on the Windows Universal App Platform. We've seen quite a few apps appearing inside of the Windows Store that are running on that platform. But obviously, this is Windows. So on a Windows 10 device, you can run your Win32 applications and your .NET applications at the same time. On a Windows 10 mobile device, those apps are going to want to be universal Windows apps. So that really begs the question, if you want an app that's going to run inside of a Windows phone device, a Windows mobile device, and it's going to run inside of, say, Continuum, and you want that same application to be running on a Windows device that's running Windows 10, yes, you're going to want that to be a Windows universal application. Another question that's come in from Sean Douglas was, do these protections extend to the mobile devices that are running Windows 10 as well? I'm presuming that in this case, Sean, you're asking that question around things like Windows Defender, around things like Credential Guard, around things like the virtual secure mode that's providing the device access. Well, the answer there is yes, pretty much. Actually, they are going to run on Windows mobile devices as well. So pretty cool that we have that capability across both platforms. We also see that Rick was asking the question, will the security features be turned on by default? And the answer there is yes. In most cases, some of these features are turned on by default, but as an enterprise IT shop, you have the capability to be able to make what you want of these capabilities. So you can take control. You can say only these executables that we allow are going to run on devices that are protected with Device Guard. You have that capability. It is entirely down to you in order to be able to take ownership and take those kind of responsibilities. Looking through some of the other questions that have come in as well. With Device Guard, instead of allowing a set of programs, can you specifically block a specific set of programs? Yes, that's a definite possibility. And there's a bunch of other questions as well that are related to security. We're going to answer some of those questions at the end of the next session with Nathan. Before we introduce that next session though, I just want to point out a couple more things. Keep the questions coming in with the hashtag TechNetVC. If you're tweeting your photographs, make sure that you tweet your photographs with hashtag TechNetVC, hashtag contest, so that we know that you're entering that contest as well. And also, we're going to have those questions that keep coming up at the end of each session. And just on the point of those session questions, I have a few winners to announce at this point. So these folks actually answered the question that came up at the beginning of Rob's session, and these are the guys and girls who have won the particular prizes. So Andy Stollenberg, Sumith Evans, Tim Hobson, Richard Galbraith and Jonathan Garcia. You folks won the last competition. Let's take a look at the competition question for Nathan's session before we dive into Windows 10 security. So the question now, which hopefully is appearing on screen, is can you name at least 10 ways to authenticate or log in to Windows 10? Let me try that again. Can you name at least 3 ways to authenticate or log in to Windows 10? So I can think of a couple off the top of my head that I use on a regular basis. Let's see what you folks come up with, and hopefully we'll announce the winners at the end of the next Q&A session. So without further ado, let's switch over to Nathan's session on Windows 10 security.
Well, good morning, TechNet audience. My name's Nathan Mercer. I work here at Microsoft in the Windows and Devices group. I look after IT Pro readiness for Windows 10. And I'm really excited today to be able to talk to you guys and girls out there about Windows 10 security. Yeah, cool. And so we're going to go through for the next hour and really talk about how Windows 10 can decisively address some of the key challenges that exist today in this new kind of security landscape, and how really Windows 10 is a critical upgrade from a security point of view. And I think this is going to be really interesting to you, for you guys as IT professionals, because security is now such an important thing. It's kind of moved away from being this kind of IT thing to being at the center, being involved in the in the boardrooms and things like that. And so in today's world, this market for cyber attacks on businesses is really wide-reaching and increasingly high profile. I mean, really every week we're hearing about security breaches, network breaches, and often they really start from the most simplest way, from people getting usernames and passwords, stealing those. You've probably heard about these, and in a couple of recent cases, hackers have infiltrated Fortune 500 companies. They've stolen usernames and passwords. That's given them access to things like point of sale systems. They've then gone on, to steal credit card data, and these attacks have really resulted in the theft of millions of credit card numbers, which have basically ended up in the black market for sale. And so, with Windows 10, we're really actively protecting against some of these modern security threats. We're strengthening the identity protection and access control inside Windows. We're really focusing on information protection and threat resistance. And really, we're going to be able to move into a place where we can basically eliminate passwords, this kind of single factor authentication, and also deliver some robust data loss prevention as well. And so where you guys are probably now in your environments is that you're probably doing the best that you can with your current resources and your current budgets. But even the best defenses today really struggle. A lot of companies are being attacked, maybe even most companies are being attacked, and the attackers are being successful. Like I said, every week we're hearing about attacks. We've seen Target, Walmart, Lockheed Martin, Google, Apple, Facebook, Microsoft, the White House, IRS. The list just goes on and on and on. And it's really because the security landscape has changed so much, just over the last even 2 or 3 years. We hear some statistics like the average breach that gets discovered in a network, people don't find out about it until 200 days after the attackers have been in there, and then often it takes them another 3 months to actually get the attackers out of their networks. So, how do we kind of end up in this situation of having this revolution of threats? Well, some of you probably remember back to the good old days of Windows XP, that kind of XP era. Everything was turned on by default inside software, and we really had these script kiddies that were going around, downloading scripts, trying to cause mischief, trying to get fame for themselves, trying to take networks down, really just for the fun of it. We then bought out XP Service Pack 2 that came out that locked down a lot of the features, inside Windows XP. Go forward a few years, things started to get a lot more sophisticated. Organised crime got involved. They found ways to really make money off this. We saw things like click fraud, but things have really even moved on since then. Just in the last few years, we've seen nation states get heavily involved. The motives have changed. It's damage and destruction, trying to steal people's intellectual property. And often these attacks can be very, very brazen. And it's not just nation states attacking other nation states. Often it's these nation states even attacking private organisations. They're not just trying to attack businesses to steal the latest jet fighter plans. We've even seen, say, nation states go after, say, like insurance companies, not to steal their money, but to steal plans, their operations, how they do business, so that can be replicated in their own company. So you guys as IT professionals and IT implementers out there, you've got a really critical role in your company to help protect the company, with Windows 10 being able to run on your endpoints. And I guess, just to give you a bit of an idea about how expensive some of these breaches can be. This was just in the news a couple of months ago, where basically NASA was testing a drone. They were going to be flying it over the Pacific Ocean. The hackers broke in. They basically changed the pre-planned flight plan for this drone, and this actually happened. And they tried to basically ditch this $300 million US drone into the Pacific Ocean. Luckily, NASA was actually watching the flight plan of this drone as it was flying around. But that was almost a $300 million incident to happen there. So how are we really addressing these new threats? Well, so with Windows 10, we've really taken a step back, and we've come up with a systematic approach of how we're going to protect Windows 10 in this new world. We're going to be breaking the attacker's economic model. There's a bunch of features there in Windows that have been there for a while, things like the address space layer randomization, things like data execution protection. It's often hard to protect against these nation states because they've essentially got an unlimited budget. But certainly crime organisations, crypto lockers, ransomware, we're going to make it really expensive by breaking the attacker's playbook, breaking the kill chain. We have a huge pool of information out there that we gather and analyse. We share that with our security partners like McAfee and a lot of the other industry players out there by analysing telemetry. And we've looked at a whole bunch of the routine attack paths that people have used to break into Windows for a long time, and we've really tried to fix those things so that those attacks don't work anymore. So there's a lot of differences here. We've changed the architecture of the system. We've looked at the way that these exploits work, the path to success. And a lot of these exploits have been around for things like 10 or 20 years. And so we've really tried to remove some of these fundamental weaknesses in Windows by changing some of the security architectures, and even things like you're going to start to see features that have been inside Windows Phone and the Windows Mobile platform for a long time, kind of coming across from mobile and coming into the desktop platform as well. So if we look at some of the common types of of attacks that happen, and this is a pretty common attack. A piece of malware gets into my machine. It might be a browser plugin or something like that. Somehow my PC gets infected. Often often this malware does not necessarily activate itself straight away. It might sit there. It might stay dormant. It might lay quiet. Often what we see happening is this malware might actually cause some performance problems on someone's PC. And normally if a user has a performance problem, hey, they're going to ring up the help desk. And so this is an interesting attack where people can use this to bootstrap and kind of move laterally inside the network, because the user calls the help desk remotes into their machine to fix it. The help desk user is probably a lot more interesting user to attack, because their credentials are going to be are going to be a lot more interesting than just a standard user. So this attack starts on an IT Pro. If I can make this attack start on an IT Pro system, it's even more interesting. And so we see attacks like this all the time. Spear phishing attacks. I craft a fake website, looks like, say, Outlook Web Access. I blast out to all of your users. Some of your users are going to go to that website, put their credentials in, and I'm going to be able to steal those credentials, and get into your network. So there's a lot of different ways that these attacks, happen in environments. But these days you should not be surprised that attacks are going to be aimed at the lowest person in your organisation, and those attacks can then lead on to essentially compromising your domain admin credentials. And we've seen cases of this happen even in as short as time, as 2 or 3 hours. So, generally speaking, these new challenges really require a new platform. And Windows 7 is a great platform, but it was designed, quite a long time ago, in terms of the security posture that we see today. So what we're going to go through in the rest of this presentation is we're going to talk about some identity protection stuff. We're going to go through and talk about how Windows 10 can protect your data. We're going to talk about how Windows 10 is a lot more threat resistant, and we're also going to talk about device security. One of the coolest things is that you're going to see that two-factor authentication is now possible to roll out across all of your endpoints in the enterprise. I'm going to show you how attacks like pass the hash attack won't work anymore by being able to steal the LSA secrets by using something called Credential Guard. And we're also going to talk about some data loss prevention stuff, something that's pretty common on the mobile platform, but now also coming across onto the desktop as well. You might have heard this news that the US Department of Defense just announced in the last couple of weeks that they're going to be rolling out Windows 10 to 4 million of their PCs in the next year. And one of the primary reasons why they're rolling this out is to protect themselves against the pass the hash attack, which is one of the predominant attacks that we see over and over again. And so you guys as IT pros really can be heroes by rolling out this technology as well. So these days, security really starts with this hardware-rooted trust. Basically, we want to be able to trust the device. If a rootkit can get underneath Windows, if a rootkit can get in between the Windows operating system and your hardware, it's basically game over. Your PC is completely owned. That rootkit can control your system memory, your pointers, all of the resources. We need the ability to have integrity and that integrity starts with the firmware on the PC. So that's why we really need UEFI. We need to move away from BIOS and move to UEFI firmware, which has secure boot. And really now, 2015, we're really now starting to see that the trusted platform module really goes mainstream. TPM 2.0. Pretty much every PC out there that you buy, this year 2016, is going to have a TPM in it, and TPM 2.0 is now really an international standard. So you can use this thing across Russia and China, where there were some challenges using the TPM 1.2 prior to that. This is also really over the next year or so is when biometrics are also going to go mainstream. Probably a lot of you as IT professionals, you might be using biometrics today. You might have some users that are using, fingerprint readers and fingerprint scanners, even on Windows 7 to log onto the PC. There's a lot of challenges with this. There wasn't a kind of an end-to-end solution inside Windows. We didn't have the middleware to kind of drive the enrollment of a user logging on their PC. So for example, if you had some Lenovo hardware or some HP hardware with a fingerprint sensor in it, there was still some work that you guys needed to do as an IT pro to actually roll that out. With Windows 10, pretty much everything is in the box. There's a full end-to-end solution. Basically everything is in the box except for the device driver for the fingerprint sensor. And when you're building your Windows PCs, that driver is going to come down from Windows Update or come down through System Center Configuration Manager. And so one of the other key things is virtualization is now really becoming a key part of the platform as well. This is how we're going to guard against malware. We're going to use these virtualization extensions inside the processor to defend the kernel. And we're really kind of in the state now where you pretty much have to assume that there's been a breach in your network and you need to kind of protect yourselves from the inside out. And that's what we're really trying to do with the kernel, is really assuming that the Windows kernel's been breached and really defending the kernel. And so if you think about the way that Windows has traditionally worked, you've kind of got a bit of a stack that looks like this. You've got apps that are running as admin or even as a standard user or maybe somewhere in between or maybe even an app running as system. If a hacker finds a vulnerability in that app, in IE or in Chrome or something like that, it's going to be pretty easy to take over that machine and have full control of the machine. With Windows 10, and this is probably one of the coolest security features in Windows 10, that's a real big game changer. It's a very powerful architectural change where we're basically bringing in a new interesting Hyper-V component into Windows 10 that essentially is a protected container or a virtual machine that runs on a hypervisor and separates that host from the actual underlying kernel. And so simply put, it's a Hyper-V container that isolates the LSASS.exe process from the running Windows 10 machine, and it essentially dramatically reduces the risk of credentials being ripped from a PC by using a tool like Mimikatz, which is basically used in these pass-the-hash attacks. So we've got essentially Hyper-V running on the PC. It boots a little mini operating system. We put all of the sensitive Windows processes into that component. They are separated, and we really achieve, and if the kernel gets compromised, there is no LSA secrets to actually be able to steal. So it's really running in this little black box. It runs its own kernel. We had this model called a trustlet, which essentially brokers the authentication. And in this current form, all of the ways that we've seen pass the hash work, it's not just defended against, but essentially eliminated by this architectural change. It's a black box. There's no network. There's no UI. There's nothing to be tampered with. And so it's immune to the extent of the common attacks that we've seen that we've seen today. And so this is a very powerful architectural change. And this reason alone is one of the big reasons why we've seen people get excited about Windows 10 from a security point of view. So how do I turn this thing on? Got to do a couple of things inside my hardware. Got to turn Secure Boot on. Got to turn UEFI on. If I have a system that supports that, I've got to configure my system to be joined to the domain. This process only protects domain credentials. It doesn't protect local credentials. So we basically go in and install the Hyper-V feature, and obviously all of this can be automated and scripted, as part of the rollout. I essentially turn on the Hyper-V feature. There's a policy setting that I turn on with group policy that's called Enable Credential Guard. It's under the virtualization-based security policy. And I then also have to go and set a BCD edit, the boot configuration data edit tool, to essentially tell my system to boot up using the VSM. And so you would automate this when you roll this out. When I then go and boot up my PC, I can look inside Task Manager and I can see the secure system process running inside the event viewer. This is how you'll know that the actual process is running. Or if I look inside, I can look inside Task Manager, I can see that I've got the secure system process running. If you go away and download, and in terms of testing this, and go and download this tool called Mimikatz, like I mentioned before, and you run this on your PC, you'll see the output here basically shows that the LSA secrets are isolated. And so that's how you'll know that this credential guard or the virtualization-based security is actually enabled and running. So next thing I want to talk about is how we're really going to help to kill off these single-factor passwords and really enable two-factor passwords for everyone. So I just got a little short video to play here to set the scene. So I hope you enjoyed this little video.
Time with them. Use both upper and lowercase letters.
Uppercase S, lowercase t, U, P, I, D.
Passwords must be at least 9 characters long. Include at least 1 numerical digit and include special characters.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. I believe the correct term is exceptional characters.
thanks. Do not use words found in a dictionary. Yeah.
Like BITE.
Do not use your name or a family member's name.
You're still 1 character short.
And finally, passwords must change every 90 days. Yeah.
What if I forget Julugi, capital S, exclamation point, new 2?
We were having a lot of problems with passwords, but with iris scan and thumbprint login and devices with enterprise-grade security, even our employees can handle that.
Okay, so what we're going to talk about is essentially how Windows Hello and how Microsoft Passport for Work works. And so, the big problem with passwords is that they are shareable secret. Either willingly or unwillingly, I can give you my password, you can give me yours, or I can get a keylogger onto your system. It's really a single factor. If I can get your passwords, I can be you, and you can be me. You can impersonate me, and so on. And probably more interestingly, we can do that from anywhere in the world. We can do that remotely. So because they are the symmetrical secret, really the passwords are just broken. And so Windows 10 really is going to bring in, with Hello and with Passport, the ability to kind of sunset passwords. You know, one of the really scary statistics out there is that, you know, about 75% of users are using the same password everywhere. And so these sites are really the weakest link. You know, I go and log on to these websites. You know, often these little small kind of commerce websites, they might not be particularly secure. I've used those credentials somewhere else. That website gets breached, and you've probably heard some of the statistics, like out there on the internet and some of the dark places on the internet. You know, there's 1.2 billion username and password combinations available, you know, for sale. And given the fact there's about 2 billion users online on the internet, there's a good chance that, you know, some of your passwords are out there for sale. And so, you know, that's really one of the big challenges with passwords, is the fact that people use them all over the place for the, so big challenges there around security. People think that, you know, domain passwords are safe, but if you think about the problem that I described before with phishing, you know, Google did a study recently and published some research where up to 45% of users could have their username and password phished out of their Gmail account just simply by creating a fake-looking Gmail login web page, blasting that out to your users, and some of your users are going to go and put their passwords in there. And so big challenges here with passwords. The user is the weakest link, and the device becomes the weakest link. If you think back to what I was talking before about the LSA secrets, getting them off the file system. So big challenges. So, you know, people start to roll out PKI solutions, certificate-based solutions, to try and solve some of these things. PKI can be pretty complex. It can be costly, and really all that happens is really then your certificate authority comes under attack. So a lot of customers start rolling out two-factor authentication. They feel pretty good about rolling that out. But you know, we've really yet to meet anyone that has rolled out two-factor authentication everywhere, using cards or dongles or key fobs or smart cards, and so people generally only put this onto their highest value assets, or things like VPN concentrators and things like that. So. Don't feel too bad. This is a pretty common scenario that happens today. So what we're really trying to address with Windows 10 is to simplify this and reduce some of the complexity and costs around rolling some of these solutions out. And this is really where Microsoft Passport for Work comes in. This is not like you might have heard the word Passport before that was related to to Windows Live authentication. This has nothing to do with that. This is not the old Passport. If you're familiar with smart cards or a virtual smart card, this is very, very similar to that. A smart card must use a PIN, and really, biometrics is the way that we want to go here. The keys have to come from somewhere. They come from a PKI. Not everyone is going to use a PKI for user authentication. It's pretty difficult for a smaller customer or a small medium business customer to roll out some of these solutions. So Passport really is the best attributes of a smart card. It's a certificate. It's this asymmetrical public-private key that is very, very well, understood, but it can use biometrics and it can use key-based authentication. Passport can actually generate its own keys. We use a TPM, which makes sure that those key pairs are unique in the world. They are stored locally inside the TPM, and physically inside the hardware of my device. We don't need to provision them centrally. They can be provisioned on the local machine. And then from a trusting a device point of view, the device can be one of the factors for the authentication. And this is basically what we call next generation credentials. which is now called Microsoft Passport. So the credentials are secured by hardware. We can't extract those out. They're physically bound into the device, and even if I try and pull the data off the device physically, it's not replayable. In terms of being able to do bad stuff with those credentials. So really, these next generation credentials, I prove who I am. I receive this one-time PIN. I type that into my machine. The code and password, must be one of them. This key gets generated locally, and then really everything else works in the same way in terms of the authentication. When I go and access something, I can use my PIN to log on to Windows, to log on to websites, to authenticate. And this is really where Windows Hello comes in, where Windows Hello gives me the ability to use biometrics to actually unlock my Microsoft Passport and use my Microsoft Passport to be able to do that. So basically, Windows Hello is not an authentication scheme, but it's really basically a way to locally unlock, using this gesture. Some of you might have, seen Windows Hello before, played with Windows Hello before. We've obviously got the Windows Hello cameras, the new infrared cameras, in our Surface Books, in our Surface Pro 4s, and there's a bunch of other devices out there that have it, from Dell, Lenovo, HP, Toshiba, and so on. We can also use the iris scanner inside the Lumia 950 and 950 XL as this local unlock gesture, and then we can still use fingerprints, which some of you out there might have been using for a while as well. So this is, basically the way we're going to kind of promote the adoption of the Microsoft Passport technology is it'll essentially work on your, if you upgrade your Windows 7 devices, running Win 7 to Windows 10, it'll still work on that type of hardware. So it's not like you need to suddenly go out and buy a whole bunch of new machines. We've got support inside Active Directory. We've got support inside Azure AD. And then from a consumer point of view, this also works with Microsoft accounts as well. And then you'll also be able to use this for consumer websites and web services as well. So this is really going to help you roll out the end of passwords and essentially two-factor authentication for everyone. So next area I'm going to talk about is how we are dealing with data loss prevention inside Windows 10, and this is a big problem that customers have out there today. Is it's just too easy to accidentally leak stuff. There's a bunch of industry research that's happened. 87% of senior managers admit to uploading work files to their personal email account or into cloud accounts. Almost half the users out there have accidentally sent sensitive information to the wrong person, and so it's just too easy to leak information. Again, willingly or unwillingly, it's just really too easy to do that. So what we're going to do inside Windows 10 is we're obviously protecting the devices, we're protecting the system and data if that device gets lost or stolen. We also have data separation, containment, bring your own device separation. From a leak protection point of view, we're going to prevent unauthorized apps from accessing data. But we can still make it so that you can share data out using the Windows Azure rights management service. So how do we protect data at rest? Well, device encryption is essentially on by default now. You don't need Windows Enterprise to have this. It's in Windows Professional has BitLocker, and even normal Windows 10 actually has device encryption that's powered by BitLocker and automatically on. Once we escrow the key. So some pretty cool things that are available inside Windows 10. So next area I'm going to talk about is data separation and containment, and again, just got a little video here to kind of set the scenes before I come back and talk a little bit more about this.
Most data leaks will not really intentional. I manage IT for Rilla Cloud's marketing org, which is 450 seats. Like any place around, people just can make mistakes. They try to upload confidential documents onto personal cloud storage.
We're on mute, right? Yeah, I think so.
What I would like to say is that is the stupidest idea I have ever heard.
Hello?
And copy and paste business information that's really confidential onto the non-corporate sites. We needed a solution that could tell the difference between the personal documents and those really critical business documents that need to be protected. Because a lot of people around here, they don't think. Microsoft's enterprise data protection. I do sleep a little better, but just a little.
Okay, so enterprise data protection or EDP. This is probably a feature that you IT pros out there might have heard of before, but probably haven't had a chance to play with yet. The reason why you probably haven't had a chance to play with this is it's actually not in the current Windows 10 builds, but we'll be releasing this later this year, and in fact there'll be a Windows Insider preview build that comes out with this, very, very soon, and so you'll be able to play with this, shortly. So the basic premise behind enterprise data protection is, with this increase of employee-owned devices, there's also an increasing risk of accidental data loss through apps, through services, through email, through social media, through the public cloud. Because all of those things are really outside of the enterprise control. Like, for example, I might send the latest pictures to my personal email account. I might copy and paste stuff that's not allowed to go outside the organisation into a public Yammer group or into a public Slack or onto Twitter. I might send out the latest sales reports and stick them inside a public cloud storage. And really EDP is designed to protect against all of this potential data loss. And the key thing is it's designed to do this without interfering with the way that a person uses their PC. They can use their normal apps, they can do it in a normal way, and we're really protecting these enterprise apps and data against this accidental data loss prevention on enterprise-owned devices, on devices that you guys own and manage, but also on personal devices that employees are bringing into work, without requiring massive changes inside your environment or having to roll out different applications to be able to use this. And then with this data protection technology, we also link in and work with the Azure Rights Management Service, worked with EDP, so we can extend this data protection for data that leaves the device, such as when an email attachment is sent from an enterprise-aware version of one of these apps. So there's a bunch of cool things that EDP does in terms of having these different protection modes, and you can kind of think about EDP as this secure encrypted container. And so basically 4 different modes that we can put enterprise data protection into. We've got a blocking mode where we will look for risky data sharing practices and essentially stop the employee from completing that action. This might include sharing data across non-enterprise protected apps, as well as sharing enterprise data between other people or devices outside of your organization. So for example, we could stop someone from loading up the latest loading up the latest sales information from Excel, copying it into their clipboard, going to a web browser, going out to Gmail or Outlook Web Access or something like that, and then pasting that information into the browser. We can alert on that. We can stop that. We can audit that. The second mode we have is a thing called override, where we essentially look for this risky data sharing, and we'll actually warn employees if they do something deemed potentially unsafe. This is really a management mode that lets employee override the policy if they want to and share the data, but it's audited, it's logged, it's tracked, it's making them aware that they're about to do a bad thing. We also have a third mode, which is essentially an audit mode. EDP Enterprise Data Protection just runs silently there in the background. We're logging this inappropriate data sharing if it happens, but we don't block anything. And then lastly, the kind of default mode is when EDP is essentially off. It doesn't help, protect or audit your data at all. All of this policy is controlled with an MDM, and look out for a Windows Insider build that'll be available in the pretty soon. That has this enterprise data protection feature inside it, so you'll be able to start playing with it. Okay, so one of the final areas we're going to talk about is how we are protecting protecting Windows 10 against these active threats. And so we've talked about Credential Guard. We've talked about how that essentially eliminates the LSA secrets. And so what I'm going to talk about now is a feature that we call Device Guard. And essentially the end goal here is that you want to be able to control what apps can actually run inside your environment. And so the challenge here is that going forward, we want the trust for the app must be earned. And so you've got a couple of choices here. We can go in this traditional mode where where basically apps just run, people can download stuff off the internet, they can install them, they can run them. Or we've got this new mode inside Windows 10 called Device Guard, where we can essentially, whitelist and blacklist and control what apps can actually run on the PC. This is kind of similar to Credential Guard in that it actually builds on top of the virtualization-based security, the virtual secure mode, or the Hyper-V container type technology that I talked about before. But it's really a key new Windows 10 feature that better protects against malware and zero-day attacks by basically blocking against anything other than trusted apps. And so if you think about the way things work on the mobile platform, if you think about, say, Windows Mobile or Windows Phone, traditionally the only way that you get apps onto those platforms is through the store, with these signing certificates. And this is kind of similar to how Device Guard works. We block anything other than trusted apps. You are in control of what apps actually work, or what apps Device Guard considers trustworthy, either via the vendor of that app or through the Windows Store digital certificates, or through an easy process where you can actually sign apps to be trusted by Device Guard. And so we're essentially using this hardware technology and virtualization to further isolate these Windows components away, and those components determine whether these apps, whether these apps are actually trustworthy. And this helps protect against attackers, malware that have got elevated privileges on your machine. And this really gives Device Guard a significant advantage over traditional anti-malware and app control technologies like AppLocker, because they can actually be subjected to attack by tampering by elevated users or elevated processes, and that and Device Guard is essentially protected against that. So how do I turn this on? Similar way to turn this on as Credential Guard. I'm showing you here, how you do this through the UI. The way that you would normally roll this out is through PowerShell or using the DISM, the Deployment Imaging Servicing Management tool on your images. But essentially turn on this virtualization-based security with Hyper-V and this isolated user mode. I enable the UEFI secure boot inside my hardware, just like I do with Credential Guard. And then I essentially roll this out using a group policy. So inside GPO, I go into Admin Template, System Device Guard. I right-click and turn virtualization-based security on. I then go in and edit the policy. And I've got to turn a couple of things on here. I turn on Secure Boot. I turn on DMA protection from selecting Platform Security. And then essentially Device Guard is on. If I go into my event viewer, I'll see that the virtualization-based security policy is enabled. And then the next stage is I essentially need to roll out these catalog files that essentially tell Device Guard what to do, how to enforce. And we roll this out onto the system, and that tells us what are our trusted apps. And we have a signature, or we have a binary hash that's added to this thing that we call a CI policy, or a code integrity, code integrity policy. And that's essentially how Device Guard works. This is also integrated into System Center Configuration Manager. Config Manager can also push this policy out and get this policy down onto your machines. Heaps more info, in fact, about this on on TechNet in terms of the deployment guide of how you would actually roll this technology out. So heaps of cool security technologies inside Windows 10. We've looked at Device Guard, how that is actively providing threat protection for your Windows systems. We've talked about how Windows 10 has this hardware-rooted trust using Secure Boot, using UEFI firmware. We've talked about the two-factor authentication, Windows Hello, Microsoft Passport for Work and PIN, and then we've also talked about how the Enterprise Data Protection feature with DLP is going to be coming into the Windows 10 platform, very shortly. So hopefully that gives you a pretty good idea of why Windows 10 is so interesting from a security point of view. And I hope you stick around, because there's loads of other cool Windows 10 content coming from my colleagues later today. They're going to go through some of the management features of Windows 10 and some of the productivity features. So look, I hope you stick around and see some of the other content that'll be available very soon. So enjoy the rest of the TechNet conference. Thank you.
A whole load of interesting stuff. I'll give you a second so that you can get yourselves together, having just made the walk from the studio. Folks, we are loving some of the stuff that you guys are putting out there onto the Twitter right now. We're loving some of the stuff that you guys are putting out there onto the Twitter right now with the hashtag TechNetVC. It's amazing stuff, and we're starting to see quite a lot of cool things coming in. I've actually just been taking a look through some of the photographs that you've been sharing, and I'm going to share some of those photographs with everybody right now on the stream, so everyone can see some of these, because some of them are frankly pretty fun and pretty cool. So to start off, I think you guys are actually probably having some kind of secret competition around the number of screens that you're able to get into any one shot in any of the stuff that's happening on Twitter. So far, I think we can see Rod Trent from IT Dev Connections. He has X3 Gold running on his machines. He's running about 3 screens or so. Most folks, as I've said earlier, seem to be running at around about the 3 to 4 screens mark. But I did see this one gentleman who appears to be suggesting that this is Stephen Centelli. He's showing us, I think he's running on 7 screens in order to be able to watch the conference everywhere that he's going. Either that or he is just charging up every one of his devices and also making sure that he can drink from his Batmag mug. So pretty cool stuff. Thank you very much for sharing all of your photos on the hashtag TechNetVC. We are going to keep looking at lots of those. But in addition to that, Nathan, thank you very much for making the walk between the two places and a great session on security there. Can you just give me the 2-minute wrap for anybody that maybe didn't see everything from start to finish? What did you cover?
So we really went through the full kind of gamut of how Windows 10 is a real big game changer when it comes to security. And you know, probably a lot of IT professionals out there, you guys are on Windows 7 and you know, Windows 7 is a great platform for its time. But I really went through and talked about the new types of attacks that we're seeing, the types of attacks that we see all the time in the newspapers in terms of people, breaching with passwords, leaking their usernames and passwords, and that's really one of the predominant ways that companies are getting hacked these days. Intellectual property being stolen, credit cards being stolen. So really talked about how from an identity point of view, we're starting to move so much of the security, into the user space, starting to trust the device and having the device as a really important piece with trusted platform modules in the devices. We went through and talked about how we're protecting data inside Windows 10, how we've kind of basically made BitLocker on by default now, even across home users running Windows 10. We talked about how we're going to contain data and kind of separate business data and personal data apart from each other with the enterprise data protection feature, which is kind of like a secure container. We talked about how Windows 10 is a lot more threat resistant than Windows 7 ever will be. And we spent a bit of time really talking about how Credential Guard works, how Device Guard works, how EDP works, and really, Credential Guard is probably really the single kind of coolest Windows 10 security feature there. It really eliminates that that pass the hash attack, which has been an attack on Windows for the last kind of 25 odd years since since the LSA secrets have been around. And so look, some pretty cool features coming in Windows 10, and I guess IT pros are going to hear about some of the other features today. But from my point of view, I just think security is really the number-one reason why we've seen our commercial customers in the business space really seriously thinking about not if they're going to roll out Windows 10, but when.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I've certainly seen over the course of the past year or so of talking to folks about Windows 10 and the stuff that's coming. Everybody basically seems to be focusing in on security right now, and I think it's probably because the landscape out there is so complicated today. Yeah. And it's kind of interesting because as we start talking to IT guys out there, it's something that we haven't all had to face on a daily basis. Quite often, there's been a security department inside of the company, and it's always been their responsibility to make sure that the security works. And the thing that I think has been one of the major changes that IT pros have seen over the course of the past year or so, probably a little bit more, is the fact that security has become everybody's responsibility.
Absolutely.
Every single person has to have at least an understanding of how security works, but even more so, when you're the IT admins now, you really need to have an understanding.
Yeah. It's not just this kind of geeky IT thing. It's it's not good enough just to kind of hire a chief security officer. It really kind of has moved into this boardroom scenario where it used to just be an IT thing, but it's now really a business thing. And if you're not if you're not using some of these technologies to protect your business, maybe you won't be in business tomorrow. And I think, more and more people are really realizing, how important it is to protect all of these things. It's not just slapping an antivirus on your Windows PC and putting some firewalls on. As you point out, you've really got to look at kind of everything along the entire chain. The entire chain through security as well.
Yeah, and I guess part of this is because so many folks out there have actually been compromised now in some way. Their passwords and their user credentials have been leaked onto some password list on the internet. And I think what's kind of interesting and probably unique right now is that Windows as an operating system has mitigations in place to be able to help you protect against those things, which maybe don't exist, frankly, in all the other operating systems right now. And
absolutely. Yeah.
It's a really big thing. When people are saying, why should I be going to Windows 10? That actually is one of the key reasons, because it's one of the only operating systems that can help you protect against leaked credentials.
Absolutely. And like you say, leaking credentials and then also, that's I guess another key place where enterprise data protection comes in. And probably, you IT pros out there, you're probably familiar with doing the similar types of technology on your mobile platform. It's a pretty common thing, particularly on Android platform. To roll out some of these secure containers, because from a BYOD point of view, you just got no idea what code is running on there, and you want to be able to protect your documents and email and things like that. And that's, I guess, is what we've done with this enterprise data protection, is bring this kind of similar technology that's familiar in the mobile platform, bring it over into the PC. And as you point out, really, people are using the same tools. It's the same operating system. It's not like they have to, make massive changes to the OS. And the key thing is that we're just using the same applications. It's the same Excel. It's the same Word. I don't have to use this kind of weird viewer, which kind of degrades the experience for a user. And I think one of the really interesting things about users is users take the path of least resistance. Right, and if you don't give them them the tools and technologies that they need to work, they'll find a way to work. It's why people put stuff onto cloud services and share stuff on Dropbox or OneDrive. It's because people want to work, and so IT pros, we really need to be enablers with some of the security technology, rather than kind of having our heads in the sand and believing that this stuff is kind of not happening in the background.
So if you were to, I have my favourites. I was going to ask you, what's your kind of favourite security feature that's come out with Windows 10? Maybe the one that's been most impactful on you personally, or has impacted the things that you're interested in. Which one of those features would you say is like the thing that lights up in your head?
I mean, I personally, I love Credential Guard from a technology point of view, from an architectural point of view. It's been something that we've been trying to do with Windows for a long time to protect those LSA secrets. It's not we've known that it's a challenge for a while. It's not like we just suddenly discovered this and stuck it into Windows 10. But from a user point of view, probably the thing that I use most on a day-to-day basis would have to be Windows Hello and Microsoft Passport for work.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
And I wondered if you were going to say that. Great minds think alike.
Yeah.
And I guess probably IT pros out there, you've probably seen Windows Hello. Simon, I know that you've demoed it several times on here on Channel 9. I actually think it's the Microsoft Passport piece that is actually more interesting, because Hello essentially just unlocks my passport and lets me use my passport. And I just think, one of the big things that I see IT pros wanting to do is kind of a bit like what we've done with Office 365, have this kind of evergreen approach to the desktop where everything is just up to date. And from a self-service point of view, when you bring some of these technologies together, I log onto my PC with my Azure Active Directory account. Azure Active Directory tells my Windows PC to set up the passport, to configure the PIN. Windows Hello, then controls unlocking that PIN. And so from a back-end security point of view, it's, super secure technology. But for me as an end user, it's just simple. It just works. So it's not like I have to do any of this, crazy different stuff or carry around key fobs or things like that. I log onto my PC, or I log on with a PIN or my iris or my, my fingerprint, and it's just simple for me as an end user, but also really delivering what the IT department wants, which is the secure platform. So probably, that combo of Windows Hello and the Microsoft Passport for Work are the coolest things.
Yeah. As I mentioned, it is for me as well. And one of the reasons that I find it to be particularly cool is that actually my PC is configured with Microsoft Passport for Work. So once I sign into it, to sign into my PC, I type in a PIN to unlock my TPM. I actually was on this quite early on, and I started to experiment and play around. My Microsoft domain credential password right now is 64 characters long. And there's no way that I could remember that. It's actually a sentence, and I have to, change case and all that kind of stuff in order to meet the complexity requirements. But it's a 64 character long password. There's no way that I'd be typing it in on my phone every time I want to access a resource. The coolest thing about this for me is I don't have to remember my password anymore. In fact, a while ago, I got into a situation where I'd forgotten my password, but it didn't stop me working. I was still able to use everything that I needed to, because I'd actually taken, as I enrolled my Windows PC and my Windows Mobile into Microsoft Passport, I'd actually just got the authentication tokens onto those devices. And as long as I knew my PIN, I was able to access everything. And by everything, I mean completely seamless single sign-on across the whole of Office 365, which obviously internally we use for our email. We use it to access all of our sites and documents inside of SharePoint and OneDrive. But also everything is federated with Office 365 and with Azure AD as well. So I was even able to access and do things like my expenses, being able to access the HR system on my phone, because it was all just completely possible. It didn't cause me as the end user any kind of concern to just be entering my PIN. And one of the coolest things as well that I noticed is that because I was accessing it in that way, to make sure that I was really who I said I was, every so often, just in the middle of something, my PC would come up and ask me to re-prompt for my PIN again so that we could continue working and everything stayed secure. It's a really cool experience as an end user to be in that situation, to not have to worry about what my password is and having to make sure that when it's changed, I know it again. You kind of very quickly move out of that.
I mean, complexity is really the enemy of security, and I think the thing that you've just described is just such a simple end-to-end scenario for a user. Everything just works like you said. You get single sign-on to all of your back-end sites. And so it'll be cool for you IT pros out there when you get the kind of chance to roll this out and play with it. There's obviously a few requirements inside the network with things like Azure AD and Windows Server 2016 to be able to roll some of these things out. But yeah, I mean, just cool technology and just so simple for a user to use.
Yeah. So we've had a few other questions that have come in during your session, so let's see if we can answer some of these. One of the first ones was, and we've kind of already answered this really, what sort of security threats has Windows 10 fixed that didn't really exist inside of the Windows 8, Windows 7 timeframe? Probably the biggest one is the pass the hash attack. While the attack existed, actually being able to execute it and exploit that potential was really kind of difficult when we released Windows 7, kind of difficult when we released Windows 8, became very easy towards the end of our Windows 8 timeframe with the release of the Mimi's Cat script and those kind of things. So probably one of the single biggest threats that it prevents is the credential attack, by implementing something which I don't think folks necessarily realise is as deep a thing as it is, actually putting in what we call virtual secure mode. That isn't something we could easily backport to previous versions of Windows. That's a massive architectural change to the way that the kernel works.
Yeah, absolutely. I think probably one of the other key ones there would be from the malware point of view with Device Guard.
Yeah.
And Credential Guard is something that that IT pros would probably roll out to every single PC. Device Guard, you might not roll it out to every single PC. You might just roll it out to your high value ones, or the ones that are exposed like a kiosk or some sort of kind of customer-facing machine. But that's a big challenge for IT pros today with Windows 7 and Windows 8. With antivirus, you're essentially always on the back foot. There's I think it's 300,000 bits of new malware discovered every day or every week or something like that. And how do you keep up against this race for that? And with Device Guard, I mean, literally only the apps that are signed will actually be able to run.
Yeah.
And so that those are probably two of the key advancements between Windows 8 or Windows 7 and Windows 8 compared to Windows 10 from a security point of view.
So we've also had some questions around in order to put some of these things in place, what other technology do we need to roll out inside of the environment? Alan Florence, hi Alan, asked a question around, will any of the features require Windows Server 2016 to be able to manage them? I think the answer to that is a couple.
Yeah. So basically if you were going to roll out Windows Hello inside the enterprise, Windows Hello in the enterprise basically relies on having the Microsoft Passport for Work and the PIN scenario that you just described on your PC and your phone before. And so that's a kind of a combination of things. It requires some group policy settings, but probably the key one there is you need to have at least one Windows Server 2016 box inside your environment. Obviously, Windows Server 2016 is not out yet. Obviously, the way that the way that you're using it on your PC is we've got the technical preview build installed, here at Microsoft, and so when Windows Server 2016 comes out later this calendar year, you guys will be able to roll that out. And so that's a requirement. You need to have at least one Windows Server 2016 box. And you also need to do a schema extension to your AD to make that particular feature work as well.
Yeah. Another question that's come in is around Device Guard, but it also extends to Credential Guard as well. These technologies require Hyper-V. So what if the end user needs an alternative hypervisor to Windows 10 on their system? This is actually a kind of cool answer. So one of the things that's been added into Windows 10 and Windows Server 2016 is the ability to do nested hypervisor. And it may be partly so that we can enable features like this. So it means that we can take Windows 10, virtualize Windows 10 on top of Windows 10 and still be able to run things inside of a Hyper-V partition. So it will work. If you're using another hypervisor, again, things should work with that hypervisor. There's obviously going to need to be some testing and certification by those hypervisor vendors, but it should all be fine.
And I guess from an end user point of view, I mean, I guess that maybe that end user is kind of more of an IT pro that needs to be able to run VMs on their machine. If you kind of think about a normal kind of office worker, it's not like that virtualization based security. They don't really see Hyper-V. It's a black box. It doesn't change the way that they use Windows or change the way that Windows works from an end user point of view. It's not like they can go in and start up VMs and things like that.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting point, because I'm guessing that like most of the IT folks out there that have seen that are going to say, oh yeah, Hyper-V. It's not. This is a very interesting kind of.
It's a Hyper-V technology. But it's not like you suddenly run up a VM and connect
and put your services inside of it.
Yeah,
it's very different. It's the way that I've had this explained to me, and I think it's a pretty cool way of thinking about it actually, is that the Hyper-V that you're running is actually the partition which then the operating system would run inside.
Absolutely.
So as a result, when you think about that from a very, very specific kind of hardware level, the only way for things to talk in and out is if there was a driver in place, and that is essentially a driverless partition.
Yeah, there's no UI, there's no networking, there's no kind of I/O. It's literally a black box.
And it drives that down into a very, very specific set of capabilities that are very, very limited, and we're in complete control of them because the only thing that can run are things that we've signed. So it puts us into a pretty cool position there. We've got a question here from Bruce Huber, which is, will I be able to sign our existing third-party apps so that they will run under Device Guard? And if so, what will happen when some of those apps perform auto-updates? Will the updates install and run even though they're not signed separately? That's a great question. We're actually building a service that will allow you to be able to sign your applications. So once the applications have been signed by that service, they'll be able to run. I'm guessing that they'll probably have to be signed again when there's an update in order to allow the update to actually run. Because just think about that from a threat point of view. Just imagine if we didn't require that resignature. I can think of ways that you could essentially exploit that as a method of attacking the operating system there.
There'll also be, I guess we're also working with OEMs and hardware vendors and stuff like that to. There'll be PCs that come out which essentially have device guard already turned on and kind of working out of the box as well. And I guess his question. I mean, it works with any app, Win32, universal apps, and then we've also got that signing service, like you said, that the kind of portal where you can log in and sign your own apps.
Another question that we've actually had is if you were going to. This is a pretty technical question, and it all gets a little bit to inception points here. If you wanted to be able to own the OS, what would happen if you were to try and own the underlying master OS? Well, actually, because this is the type of hypervisor it is, that would actually be completely impossible to own the underlying OS. Now, if and I guess there's a potential vector of attack here that would happen for any operating system that's running inside of a virtual environment. Yes, there are potentials that you'd be able to take control over that operating system, but they literally exist for any operating system that is virtualized, and they're pretty much impossible to, even right now, to combat. There's also been a question around enterprise data protection. Someone saying that they don't quite understand all of the technology behind EDP just yet, but it looks very, very cool. I think that's a very fair statement. EDP is an amazingly clever technology that we've been working on for a while to bring it to market. I think you'll start to see a lot more kind of detail that'll help you to drill into exactly how that works over the coming months. There are some features inside of, if you want to start kind of exploring it today, if you have the Windows Insider Preview and you're using Microsoft Intune, you can start to use some of the policies there to be able to explore what EDP might be able to do for you inside of your environment.
Yeah, and when we release these new Windows Insider builds, there'll be we'll be have some deployment guides and things like that for EDP that talk about how it works, how you configure it, how you set up those different protection modes that I talked about, going from block to override to audit. Yeah. So look out for those guides, which will be out on TechNet pretty soon.
Cool. Nathan, thanks very much for joining us. I just want to remind you guys before we dive into the next session that we have some competitions that are running. Don't forget the drones and phones competition. You can enter that by going to technetvc.com. When you're tweeting your photographs, don't forget to include hashtag TechNetVC and hashtag contest. And also, don't forget to make sure that you're following the MSIT Pro hashtag. And then there are our quiz questions. Now, just very quickly, running this through for our next session, the question that you need to be able to answer in order to be in line to get hold of some of those tech points is, what type of policy do you use to manage an Azure domain-joined Windows 10 machine? That question again, what type of policy do you use to manage an Azure domain-joined Windows 10 machine? Okay, we're going to hand over to someone who I think is going to be fantastic with this next session, Jason Lesnick, who is inside of the Windows team here at Microsoft. He's just joined that team from the Intune team, so he's got a pretty unique and valuable view on management of Windows 10. So we're going to switch over to that session in just a second.